your brain can change and grow. This is the most amazing contemporary, relatively recent discovery of science about how meditation, the Buddhist methods of meditation, can affect your brain cells, the way they grow and change. Brain scientists, neuroscientists, have been studying for some time how the brain can actually change and grow and its actual structures, the number of cells in certain points. And they began to suspect that the practices that one lives made that difference. And so they began thinking about these Buddhist monks in Tibet, in Japan, in India, and all over the East, and now many, many in America and in Louisville, spend hours and hours every day in sitting, silent or chanting, singing, meditation, contemplating the reality of change, the reality of the eternal, the reality of the transcendent, the mystery of everything that is, we think is here and is real, is passing through. And they lose themselves and they develop their brains. So these scientists in several places in the United States brought monks from these areas and brought them into their MRI, magnetic resonating in what I just lost it. But MRI machines, big magnets that show images of the way the brain, the body, inside of the body works. And they've got a functional MRI that shows actual changes as things are going on. So they stuck brain sensors inside these people's skulls and set them up to do some meditating, and they could see what was going on in their brains at the same time that they were meditating. They also had a control group of people who were novice meditators, people who had been doing it, but only had been doing it for a few hours, whereas these monks had been doing it probably for 10,000 hours in their lives, older, younger monks. And what they discovered is that two particular portions of the brain that connect with certain things, the portion of the brain dealing with positive thoughts and feelings, were larger. There were more cells, there were more active cells, more cells that light up when they're meditating. And the other area was the area of calm. Where does your brain tell yourself to relax and be calm? Take whatever is happening, and that's the way it is, and you're worrying about it, just let it be. Those two areas were huge in their brains. Functional MRIs. So it's also true for other things. Truck drivers have a larger portion of their brains that handle the great mechanical things of reading the road and driving the truck. Musicians have a larger area for that artistic skill. You are in flux. Your brain is not set, fixed. You're the way now. That's one of the discoveries of Buddhism. And that gets at the heart of what we're going to talk about this week about Buddhism. Buddhism teaches that and talks about the experience of the mystery of the universe, that everything is transient. Everything is moving and changing. Everything is in flux. And I, can grow and change to keep up with the changing world. So that takes us now back to Buddha. Again, it's spelled as Iddhar. Dha. Gautama. Siddhartha Gautama was a Brahmin leader class caste of India. He was a prince. He was expected to take over a region of governance and be the ruler. And he was very protected. He was kept inside his palace. Nobody let him out. Nobody let him see what was going on in the world. He was a protected, isolated person. And he got sort of fed up with that. He was married to a beautiful wife, had a lovely son, and just couldn't quite sense that this was right for himself. And so he escaped from the palace and went out into the world. And he saw suffering. He saw illness. He saw poverty. He saw crippling disabilities. He saw misery of people living their lives. And he was shocked to discover this suffering. And he felt he had to do something about it. You can read about him in Keene, but also there's an additional reading about him in Armstrong, the History of God. She talks about in 30 pages 31 to 34 the whole story and background of Buddhism in another way than Keene does. It might be helpful if you get interested in this and look it up. This happened in India, and this is how he began his spiritual search to investigate the great mystery of life that he had been protected from for all of his life. He tried 7 years of doing different things. He became a sadhu, a beggar learner, a disciple, tried every possible way in the Hindu religion to try to find the key of what he felt he was looking for. And he couldn't find it. Finally, 7 years later, he decides he's going to sit under a great Bodhi tree. You can look that one up if you want to find out more about it. And he said, I'm going to sit here until I get it. And he quieted his mind. He began to have a sense of peace and calm. And as he went through that for hours and hours and hours, he had an ecstatic experience of the transcendent. He had the sense that he could see into the mysteries of the universe. And what he saw was that the universe is in flux. This is a very Asian thing. We'll talk some more about that in a little while. They understand that life is changing and flowing like a river. As Keene said, the Hindus said, your life is flowing like a river inexorably into the sea, into the infinite. Life is not static. Life is not permanent. And he saw that the problem of life, which he had started his vision quest about, suffering, could be addressed. And the way he discovered to do that was to let go of that expectation as suffering, the attachment to wanting things to be permanent, to be settled, to be certain, and accepting the uncertainty of the universe, and being concerned about, compassionate for other people. He came away from that. He woke up from this ecstatic experience, went and told his fellow researchers who became his followers, here's the story. Here's how I make sense of all of this stuff about suffering, about flux, about letting go, detachment, and moving ahead with compassion. He could have, you'll see in the reading, he could have said, this is so beautiful, I want to stay here and just enjoy being with the eternal until I die and I'm finally united with all that is. He didn't decide it. He didn't want to do that. He needed to share his insights with the world. And that's how he was an originator of a new movement, a new time of life that we call Buddhism. You can read how he and his followers defined this new way. You can ask yourself, is this a theistic religion? Do they have a god or gods, and how do they believe about them? What are the ethics of Buddhism? How do they understand salvation, and how does that tie in with the Hindu ideas of karma and reincarnation? And what are the keys to understand this faith? So that's a nutshell of understanding Siddartha's experience of the transcendent, of the mystery. And and at that point, he said, I am the Buddha, a Buddha, the enlightened one, which is what that means. And that's the reason he is remembered as the Buddha rather than his actual name. Now, for this presentation, I want to of other directions to put a context around Buddhism as we understand it, and as you study it in the two readings, and as you explore it other ways, perhaps. I want to go back to something we talked about early in the class, the Axial Age. When did all this happen? Studies of world history I've identified a period of time when so many amazing developments of human history occurred. Developments of civilization, developments of governance, development of technology, from the Stone Age to the Bronze Age to the Iron Age and so on. The development of weapons, development of nationalities. All of those things were happening in this period of time, which then also, and economically, which then allowed people to start thinking about, now we don't have to worry about whether the crops are coming in every day. We can be thinking about other things. And so they began thinking about life. There was the period from about 800 BCE to about 200 CE. In other words, from about the time of the Jewish prophets until the age of Jesus, the early Christianity. So what all was happening in this period of time? Let's put these things in their context. We have the prophets of the Old Testament, starting with Isaiah, the most famous one, or the first one in the Hebrew scriptures in the Old Testament. And Isaiah was started about 740 BCE. This is the number of years back. They count backwards, remember, from 0 to then. And that was in Palestine. We have the Buddha about 600, somewhere in that 6th century BC, 566, which you can see in Armstrong, page 31 to 34. Then in Greece, you have great philosophers, and the one we studied early in the section on early Christianity, who so much influenced Christianity by his philosophy of the way he understood the world working. And Plato was 430 BCE, the golden age of Greece, with all of its wonderful buildings and sculptures and and civilization and empire grew. And then we have Jesus and Christianity around 0. All of that stuff happened within this 1,000 years section of time. What's going on? This is when things begin to change and grow. Now, it's very interesting. There are two really quite different perspectives come out of this. The prophets in Israel, in the Middle East, which is literally part of Asia. We have the Buddha in India, Asia. We have Jesus in the Middle East, still Asia, not Europe. And then we have Plato. That's in Greece, which is the cornerstone of European civilization, a very different perspective on the way the world works. So we're beginning to see how things are changing and how the world as we know it now has developed and has become the way it is. So let me shift this around now, and I want us to talk about these two ways of understanding the world. This will put in context our understanding of Buddhism this week, and as we're preparing for a final exam, as you're thinking about how you're comparing and contrasting all of the religions we've studied through this semester. I want you to be, and this is not about learning facts only, it's about learning to think and learning to relate to people who have very different perspectives. So let's look at, we're going to study the Buddha. An Asian phenomenon. And we're going to look at Plato or Platonism, a very European phenomenon. This is, I admit, somewhat simplistic. It is put together for the sake of education, for the sake of getting you to see differences in some sort of stark contrast. It's not perfect. It doesn't always hang together. But the differences you'll begin to see. So we're going to make a simple distinction between these perspectives. For Buddha, reality is in flux. Everything is changing. The river is flowing. Time keeps right on moving on. Nothing is permanent. Whatever I think and feel right now shifts and change. Whatever I'm feeling, it's going to shift and change. Whatever my life is like right now, this coronavirus, this particular election coming up, the way America is or isn't in the world, and the way the world has been put together, the fact that there's a worldwide pandemic, all these are part of the flux, the transience, the impermanence of life. For Europeans, and from out of the Plato philosophy, reality is perfect. It is permanent. Plato looked at ultimate reality, the transcendent, and said that out there, and that's one of the differences, Buddha said, here's what we see in the world now. This is what reality is. Plato looked at the world and saw it's in flux and in chaos and said, that's not everything there is. Out there in transcendence, there is this perfection. There is this glorious other world that is true reality, that is perfect and beautiful and true and permanent, unchanging. Unchanging. Now, you begin to see how there's very differences here. Our European perspective, which even the black culture has accumulated a lot in America, has a lot of, we want things to get settled. We want certainty. The Buddha way of seeking how to understand that is called enlightenment. Buddha was the enlightened one, the one who has seen and experienced the truth, the light, the reality. For the Europeans, the thing is to see the perfect world. That is to see with reason and understanding. Instead of this shadow chaos world, it is to see the other world, the true world, the heaven world, the other. The way to do that for each of them, for the Buddhists, the way to do that is by becoming detached. And you'll see as you study Buddhism this week, you'll see how the whole way of Buddhism is to become so connected, so unconnected to the way I want things to be, the way we expect things to be, the way we want to have certainty and permanence, and to let that go, including eventually letting myself go. I am not, in the scheme of things, the only thing or the most important thing in the world. And I have to let all of that go. The way for Europeans is through logic, through thinking, through saying, then through finding the certainty. Science, European science particularly, and Christians and Muslims have always been into this European kind of Platonic way of doing things. We find out with certain, this is the way the world lies. These are the laws of science. This is Newton's physics. This is, if you drop something, it will fall to the floor. The law of gravity. It's certain. It's unchanging. Interestingly enough, scientists of the early 20th century began to discover life's not that way. They began to discover molecules and subatomic particles, and the way the universe and the stars and the black holes work. It's not predictable. It's not certain. It is the butterfly effect. You never know how it's going to turn out. But that certainty was the European approach to everything. In letting go of me, of my certainty, I come at this, if I'm a Buddhist, with compassion. Detachment doesn't lead one to say, doesn't make any difference, I'll pay no attention to anybody else. It makes me more aware of the suffering of my fellow human beings, wherever I find them, wherever we see them, whatever. I'm responsible for reaching out, standing with them, understanding and caring about them. That's the ethic of Buddhism. The ethic of European is hierarchy and structure. Today, we would call it law and order. We would say that there are certain ways that things have to be. And if you don't fall into that way of how the way things ought to be, that's just too bad for you. I am the boss. I am the white person. I am smarter than you are. I am whatever we think we are certain about, and we set ourselves up as that way. We run our churches that way. We run our government that way. And we have a leaning toward authority and structure rather than compassion. You can see the differences here. And I'm making them stark. I'm making them distinct. It's not that quite that simple. Another difference, for Buddhism, the end of life is sometimes called nirvana. That is the ultimate unity where all of being, the elements that make up who we all are, the stardust we're all made with, that's an image that gets put out, all of the molecules that make me, including my soul, my reality, that my identity, all of that is finally released back into the great infinity that was there. It's all in flux. It's a total release. It's not a, I will be wonderful me and singing songs that I like to sing and playing harps in heaven. No, it's a final letting go of everything and being part of everything that is. For the Buddhists, for the Platonists, this is actually where heaven and hell got invented, as we understand it in the European perspective. The Elysian fields and the underworld, heaven and hell. And those who were reasonable, good, perfect, connected, those people got to choose to go and join the gods in the Elysian fields. And it was a beautiful, wonderful place. Sound familiar? And there was the underworld where all of the dead go, and then they get to choose whether you go into Hades or on, and your soul gets to go on to the Elysian fields. Because there's certainty. We can decide who's in, who's out, who's right, who's wrong, all through this Platonic certainty and structure and law and order. These are, I'm highly critical of European sub-mentality, the way our world is put together because of this. I'm very appreciative, although I'm still a European, I'm still a Christian, I still understand how God works, but I'm being more and more informed in the way of God works through Christ by understanding some of these other insights. How is it that we can grow in compassion, be concerned, serve God and each other? How can we be serving others more than myself? How can I be standing up to the certainties of the hierarchy when it is wrong? These are things that we have to ask ourselves. We can learn from the religions. I have personally learned a lot from Buddhism about dealing with my own inner issues, my own fears and concerns, the things that stand in the way of my being healthy. If I can become detached, if I can let go of and we'll talk some more about expectations. If I can let go of my expectations that things ought to be permanent, they ought to be settled, I ought to be able to take care of that. I should be perfect. That's not what Jesus meant when he said, be perfect as your Father is perfect. I don't think. It's a matter of maybe perfection being closer and closer to a relationship and of compassion. So, the clear distinctions between European Christianity, as it's become which is very different from the Asian Christianity of Jesus. And we'll talk some more about that in following weeks as we're comparing. I've got a neat comparison of the various religions and their perspectives on life. But now for studying Buddhism, just think about it in the context of its Asian context, its understanding of the flow of life, and how that shaped a religion over time and has thrived and grown. It's not the largest religion in the world, but it's very big, it's very influential. And who is the most well-respected religious leader in the world? Maybe it's the Dalai Lama, the Tibetan Buddhist leader. There's probably a reason for that. All right, I want you to be looking up, I want you to be reading both in Keene and Armstrong what you can find out about Buddhism. Struggle with that a little bit. We'll talk about the Eightfold Way, we'll talk about detachment and compassion, and then look at all of the facts about Buddhism that we always do about all the other religions. So you have hooks to hang this religion on as you compare and contrast it, and as you run into Buddhists around Louisville. Often on a walk through my neighborhood, there is not too far away, there's a Buddhist meditation center, and these monks in their orange robes are walking the streets just like I am. People are here. We can learn to appreciate and learn and respect each other. So do that. On Wednesday, we will have our class as usual, and we'll also try a meditation experience as we did last Wednesday from a yoga experience. We'll try a Buddhist meditation experience with a mantra, some words that we'll repeat to ourselves to try to get into that sense of detachment and compassion. If you have concerns about your classwork, if you haven't gotten stuff in, please start working at that, get it in. Remember that your term papers are due this week on Thursday, I believe it is, or Wednesday, 4th. That is a quarter of your grade. I don't want anybody to fail. I want everybody to succeed. And I know you can, but you have to do the work. And my job is to help, encourage, guide, find ways to make that work for you. Please contact me if you haven't had a chance to work on this stuff yet. It's very important. If you're having problems, see Ms. Clark in the Student Services Department. If you're having particular problems, that's more than what I could help you with. Talk to people, study together, figure out how together you can make yourself a success at this wonderful HBCU, Simmons College, a wonderful opportunity for you to grow and change in the crazy flux of this world. See you on Wednesday.